Before we start this new chapter, let's cover a little bit about what happened in Chapter 2, entitled Letting Go of the Past. As he talked about the changes he has seen from the time of his childhood till the time he wrote this book, it reminds me of how things have changed even in the last 20 years. I found it fascinating how his beliefs also changed over time, as he explains in the story about the tea reading, in a premonition that another parishioner had shared with him. If you missed the previous chapter and don't know what I'm talking about, I suggest that you go back and listen. And now let's see what Father Jay has to share with us this week. Chapter 3, Carrying the Baggage of Guilt. The past is yours. Learn from it. The present is yours. Fulfill it. By Walter Fauntroy. I have taught the Silva Method of mind development and stress control for 15 years. During that time, I acquired a great deal of knowledge about human nature. I did not make a special project out of studying the nature of a human being, but after witnessing the same negative reactions of people to certain topics and the low self-image the students had of themselves, I began to take notice. The majority of persons attending the class in mind development came from a variety of ethnic backgrounds. That is not surprising, since metropolitan Detroit is known as a melting pot of nationalities. Most of them were brought up in a strict atmosphere with many rules and regulations established by their particular belief system. The majority may have been Catholic, but practically every religion was represented. I am not in any way saying that there is something wrong with having rules and laws to live by. The essence of law and order demand it. I am referring to the fact that each religion, by its very nature, is separated from other religions by having a particular set of laws, beliefs, and politics by which to live. Otherwise, there would only be one religion. What became increasingly obvious to me after teaching the Silva Mind Development course, a 40-hour course which I taught 60 times, was the connection between a sense of guilt and a poor self-image. I am not using the word guilt in the sense of committing a sin and feeling guilty about it. That is the traditional and limited meaning of the word. Rather, I am focusing on the word guilt with a much larger meaning. Webster's dictionary offers this as one of the definitions of guilt: feelings of culpability, especially for imagined offenses or from a sense of inadequacy. This is the aspect of guilt I'm referring to, along with the feeling of being unworthy, insignificant, unholy, rejected, alone, fragmented, beyond help, etc. In this wider meaning of guilt, it harbors such questions as, what is wrong with me? Why is everyone else doing so well and I am getting nowhere? Why do things always happen to me? Implying that I am the only person to whom bad things happen. Why doesn't God ever hear my prayer, while everyone else has their prayers answered? Why can't I do anything right? All of the above are only a morsel of the many expressions of guilt in the broader metaphysical sense. These thoughts of guilt, real or imagined, are bound to affect one's self-image greatly. The results could vary in the mind of one who feels such guilt, as that of being the biggest sinner in the world, being ugly because a couple of people said so, going straight to hell when death calls, and destined to be a loser. The following is a true incident that happened during one of my Silva Mind Development lectures. There were about 75 adults taking a class with me in Pontiac, Michigan. We were talking about self-image in the class and how the mind can play tricks on a person whose mind is covered with a blanket of guilt in the broader sense. A beautiful young lady who looked about 35 years old stood up and admitted in front of everyone that she considered herself ugly. We all looked at each other in amazement, since without the slightest doubt she was by far the prettiest woman in the class. I asked her why she thought she was ugly. She said that her mother always told her she was overweight and definitely not pretty. In spite of the image planted in her mind by her own mother, she did eventually get married, only to receive the same kind of treatment from her husband. Her husband emphasized that she was both ugly and fat. When this gorgeous lady, lovely, slender, and attractive to behold, was told frequently by both mother and husband that she was fat and ugly, a very strange self-concept was confirmed within her. The view of herself became so affected by such negative treatment that it caused a terrible effect in her life. Every time she looked in the mirror, she was unable to see herself. Her face simply disappeared. She could only see her body up to her neck. Her face simply did not show up as a reflection in the mirror. She was terribly frightened. She thought she was going to be punished in public because no one would be able to see her face. And she had such a pleasant, innocent-looking face. At first, the whole class, including myself, were disbelieving. She couldn't possibly be serious. She was very serious. To stand up in front of other people and admit her ugliness and shameful self-image, coupled with a deep sense of guilt, believing she deserved it, was probably the hardest thing she ever did in her life. It was only possible because she said she felt loved and accepted by the group. We had gone through a series of conditionings, or meditations, if you will, on loving, forgiving, and accepting oneself. We emphasized that the past was gone. We live in the present moment, where we can enjoy peace of mind. In such a welcoming and loving atmosphere, she opened herself up to us. After we proclaimed our total acceptance of her as a loving, beautiful, attractive, and gifted human being, which we sincerely believe she was, she said she felt truly loved for the first time in her life. Tears were flowing freely as she now saw herself as a totally different person. The next weekend when we met, she raised her hand, got up slowly, and burst out with enormous joy that she had seen her face once again in the mirror. It had been a long time. She said she really was pretty. This was no surprise to us, but when she told us that she felt good about herself and no longer felt inadequate, alone, separated, inferior, and so on, we applauded her loudly. The baggage of guilt weighs heavily. Have you honestly ever asked yourself such questions as, "What's wrong with me?" Then you may be carrying the same kind of unnecessary guilt as my friend above. Our self-image is quite fragile. Another way of looking at guilt is when frustration, anger, disgust, or the feeling of being limp or floundering follow the inability to change things around us. I'm referring to unacceptable circumstances in our life, such as conflict at home, a disgusting situation at work, or very limited freedom because of multiple responsibilities. Briefly, the feeling of being a loser or inadequate results when we are unable to change the world, others, or our own fixed attitude in a given situation. Strangely enough, our sense of carrying an unnecessary baggage of guilt and a poor self-image can be corrected by understanding that there are only two basic emotions, love and fear. The opposite of love is not hate, as many people would say. Perhaps their conclusions come from life itself, having experienced what may be called a love-hate relationship. Often spouses, whose marriage bond is based on need rather than unconditional love, hate each other when their needs are not met, and love one another when they are. This sense of love and hate can go on for years. Such a sensation can only be resolved by changing one's viewpoint. A new belief system is necessary. The Lord, who gave us life, is the creator of the universe. Since God is love, and St. John tells us in his gospel our true heritage comes from divine love, it can never change. We are an extension of God's love, and will always be. Whatever is seen through the eyes of love is seen correctly. Unconditional love is a divine viewpoint. The moment fear enters the mind, it becomes distorted. Fear is generated by the thought of separation from God, from the world, from a spouse, a boss, a coworker, a neighbor, and even from our true self or higher self. Once the frightening face of fear emerges, we are actually blinded from the truth. Seeing everything from a separated and negative point of view, fear makes us afraid of ourselves because what is not a part of us can become our enemy. It is the enemy that is the cause of all our troubles. It would be very easy to hate this enemy and even attack the enemy before we are attacked. So we attack, try to hurt, cause pain to that enemy of ours. The enemy may be ourselves or it may be another. If I can't find another, the devil is always a good one to blame. Now I feel guilty for having attacked myself, resulting in illness, or for attacking another through anger and even violence. Translating the above into a real-life experience in marriage, it would go something like this. A husband and wife are very much in love. They get along fine and every day is better than before. They really never argue. The wife keeps quiet in tense situations and lets her husband have the last word. He is always right when they have a difference of opinion or attitude. One day she goes to a seminar that teaches people how to speak up and be more assertive. The next time she and her husband get into discussion, she says what she means, and he gets a little upset. "What did you say?" You heard me. I believe I have a right to my opinion, she responds. He is completely thrown off guard. But you never talked like that before. Maybe it's time I grew up. Now begins the first battle they had since they were married. Since they now have the feeling of being separate, they can both strike out at each other, saying things they would never have said before. The fear of being attacked, the fear of losing the argument, the fear of looking wimpy has changed everything now. From that time on, whenever they have a verbal exchange out of fear and not out of love, certain other emotions will become evident. They will be yelling out of hatred and anger, emotions that were unthinkable before. The baggage of guilt is now part of the problem. Neither one of them likes hurting the other, yet the problem is not resolved. In fact, now the one will blame the other for all the misery that has taken place. This situation will not resolve itself until the basic expressions of love and forgiveness dominate their differences. True love dispels fear. Fear is the absence of love, just as darkness is the absence of light. One of them has to make the first move to change the situation into a holy relationship. It is done, as mentioned, through love, forgiveness, and understanding. Forgiveness of oneself is the first step in removing any feeling of fear and guilt. Once she forgives herself, that is, to see the truth of who she is, namely a child of God created in His divine image and therefore invulnerable, she will observe everything differently. Herself, her husband, God, and the so-called world out there. It is not denial in the sense that it never happened. Rather, it is a statement that she chooses love and, with God's help, to forgive herself and to forgive her husband. She prays to see her relationship with her husband from a different point of view. She will then talk to her husband as if nothing happened. God then turns her bond into a holy relationship. In a very real sense, love is letting go of fear, anger, violent thoughts, and the guilt that follows. Fear and the other negative emotions are seen as unreal because they are the absence of unconditional love. Being the absence of something, they are really nothing. They are now seen for what they are, just negative thoughts or false impressions. The husband in this scenario may or may not correspond with her change in mind and viewpoint. If he does, they will have some happy days ahead. If not, he may continue in his negative attitude. They may even have to leave each other. At some point in his life, however, he will seriously consider changing his point of view. Each one of us is loved 100% by our divine parent. God is incapable of unreal emotions such as fear and hate. Because we have them does not mean God is like us. On the contrary, we are striving to be like God, to raise ourselves from the imaginary prison of being trapped in the bondage of darkness and separation. I will take this up again in the chapter, Your God is Too Small. Considering guilt from a viewpoint of time is also important. This broad sense of guilt is never experienced in the present moment. It always occurs in the past, either way back in our childhood, in our teenage years, or a few years ago. It may also have been experienced last week or just last night. It doesn't really matter, as long as it was in the past. While people are in the act of doing something, they believe that what they are doing is acceptable in the present moment. Whether it is lying to get out of something, engaging in illicit sex activity, or stealing a few bucks from mother's purse. At the moment the action is performed, there is often little or no thought of actually doing something wrong. In fact, it may be seen as a very clever thing to do or very exciting experience in which to indulge. Later, when one is thinking a little more clearly and emotions have calmed down, the conscience is activated. Logic takes over and guilt sets in. What was I thinking when I did that? Stealing from my own mother. How stupid to have gotten carried away last night. This is terrible. Note, you will now see a little graph of past, present, and future, guilt, reality, anxiety, and worry. Guilt is now in command. Fear of punishment follows quite naturally. The key to resolve such conflicts is to remember that what is past no longer exists. Therefore, the guilt no longer exists. Nevertheless, guilt does continue to exist, but only in the mind, not in reality. What happened 5 minutes ago is gone forever. The only reality is the present moment. Are we then not guilty of anything we do since the past does not exist? Oh, yes. We are still acting incorrectly, and correction must be made. We are still responsible for our actions. Are we bad, evil, and deserving of punishment? Not necessarily. The best correction would be to come to the realization that we are all one. We are not separate from God, family, friends, or the church. There are rules of behavior to live by, and we simply need to make the proper forgiveness or correction. How one makes corrections is established by each religion. Protestants will go to God directly. Catholics go to confession. If the offense can be resolved within oneself, that seems to be the preference of people today. For this reason, Catholics today are going to communion 99% of the time without going to confession. This is a new phenomenon. Innocence and peace are being achieved in their minds, outside the usual procedure for Catholics seeking forgiveness. I'm not making judgment for or against this change in attitude. It is simply a common viewpoint today. Naturally, there is a small percentage of Catholics who will still confess regularly. While we are concentrating on guilt and its occurrence in the past, it would be appropriate to consider experiences that cause fear, fright, and deep concern about a future that has not taken place yet and may never take place. The fear of flying, a fear of darkness, possible earthquakes, or possibility of failing a test are all anxieties about the future which have not yet taken place. Are they real? To the person having them, yes, of course. Are they real in the present moment? No, not at all. They cannot be real, because the future has not happened yet. Only in the present moment is reality found. Since this is so, it is only in the present that we encounter God, speak to God, listen to God, relate to God. God is a God of the living, not of the dead or past, and not of the future which is not yet. The conclusion from all this is to live in the now moment. That is where God's peace, joy, and happiness can be shared by us. That is where heaven and earth meet. That is where Creator and creature join as one. That is where you and I can find the greatest joy imaginable in this life. Chapter 4. The Necessity of Change. All limitations are self-imposed, by Ernest Holmes. It is a biological fact that anything that does not change is dead. The cells in our body, which are energy in motion, are always in a state of great activity. They are either growing, functioning, or dying all the time. Organs, likewise, have work to do. They are not static, or, so to speak, just sitting there doing nothing. An organ, such as the heart or liver, would atrophy if it were not functioning. Larry, a very close friend and classmate of happy memory, had that very problem with his heart. The back of the heart had atrophied. It was only a matter of time when his life would be cut short. His life ended soon after, and he was among the first of our class of 1956 to pass on. Our minds cannot remain the same either, because the mind, too, is an energy, and energy can never remain dormant. Webster's New Collegiate Dictionary defines energy as the capacity of acting or being active, coming from the Greek word energos, meaning at work, active, busy. It will always find a way to express itself. Our minds are extremely active. It is estimated that more than 100,000 thoughts pass through our minds every day. We are not consciously aware of them because we are protected from having to sort them out or giving consideration to each thought. In the same way, we are not aware of the blood circulating through our system, nor are we conscious of the food being broken down by a chemical factory of acids and enzymes, and being converted into billions of fresh cells needed daily by the body. If a person's mind is never challenged or awakened to new possibilities, it will run the same pattern of thought day after day. Again, if a person leads a very dull life with the repetition of the same activities every day, the thoughts may be compared to watching the same movie every day, over and over. I have witnessed this type of mind many times, thousands of times, while working in the inner city with knights of the road, street persons. Since we had an open-door policy, the homeless who walked the streets and slept at rescue missions would come in without an appointment in order to receive some form of help. Many of them would give the same story of how they lost their job, their family, and their security. Others would include how they started drinking. Usually, it was not their fault, but caused by others. Even if it were their own fault, the story would be repeated each time with each visit. I could predict quite accurately what some of them would say, word for word. It is easy to get locked into a mindset where there is not enough variation in a person's life. Just walking the streets every day and doing the same thing over and over does not allow the imagination to be exercised and retards the desire for change or challenge. These thought patterns are not restricted to the homeless. People with a good income, a steady job, and a fine family can fall victim to the same kind of mindset. If every day consists of work, food, and television, the only variation is the order in which they take place, there is a danger of falling into a mental trap. Just as our bodies need some exercise to function properly, so does the mind. Introducing the same thoughts each day is neither healthy, creative, or exciting. I have discovered in my years of counseling that some marriages become quite dull and even depressing if nothing new is ever planned. Events will happen, of course, because life itself is unfolding, whether we like it or not. But we are co-creators with God. We need to be creative, exploring new ideas, making future plans, or varying the activities by surprising one another with a gift, a ticket to see a play, suggesting an exciting place to go for a vacation, or countless other possibilities. It has become obvious to me that when you have a marriage in which one of the spouses is moving forward and the other is not, they tend to drift apart, sometimes leaving each other for good. Some spouses, to get out of the boredom of a dull life, start taking some courses in adult education. Regardless of what it may be, whether it is designed towards self-improvement in the form of painting or doing ceramics, or whether he or she joins a group that is studying some phase of metaphysics, the subject is not important. A couple can lose interest in each other because, as we discussed earlier, one is living more creatively than before and communication begins to break down. It is not enough just to tell a person what is wrong and why they are not communicating as they did previously. They need to be a part of the process. There must be a change in one's thinking, one's viewpoint, one's belief, one's attitude. This kind of change is called a metanoia, from the Greek word meaning to change one's mind or one's heart. It refers to a radical change. Changes on the surface do not affect our thinking very much. Perhaps, temporarily, there will be a slight change, but after a brief period of time, one goes right back to where he or she started. We see this often with people who start something new, such as dieting, then give it up shortly. The desire for change has no depth. It is an empty desire, and very soon, quite predictably, they proceed to put the weight back on again. What is needed is a radical change that changes the whole person. It is swift and complete. A change at the level of metanoia even causes a universal healing within the person. In this way, one's whole being experiences the change. Their close friends will notice immediately that this is not quite the same person who was always complaining about something, always angry at someone, and either going to or coming from a fight. They will even say, "You look a little different. What did you do to yourself?" If you reduce your weight by 15 or 20 pounds, their eyes pop out in amazement. The key to a genuine radical change is education, meditation, and the application of new principles by which to live. Education alone does not bring about the change desired. We know so little about ourselves, who we are, our origin, our purpose, our reason for living, and our position in the master plan. There are very few persons on this earth with a perfect self-image. The scriptures tell us a lot about ourselves, and so do the sciences. In John 14:12, Jesus says, "I solemnly assure you, the one who has faith in me will do the works that I do, and greater far than these." This is a powerful statement and promise. How many people do you know who actually believe they can do what the Master Jesus did, and even greater things? What I am saying is, how many human beings believe they can walk on water, change water into wine, or heal every sickness? And even greater things than those. If someone claims they can, I first want to see them walk on water, not ice, for starters. The average self-image on this planet is far below what it really is. The general opinion of oneself is not even close to the truth. God does not make junk. On the contrary, a human being is nature's masterpiece. Unfortunately, that is not what the average person thinks. I had taught the Silva Method of mind development and stress control for 15 years, and part of the course dealt with what constitutes one's self-image. After much discussion about this with many classes, it became obvious that the average person's view of himself or herself is usually not only on the negative side, but often quite distorted. I'm not saying that we are ready to walk on water, but I am saying that there are certain facts about ourselves that, if put into practice, will put us on the right path that does lead to the truth of who we are and what we are capable of accomplishing in this life. The discovery of the true nature and makeup of a human being, without exception, helps tremendously in our development and self-confidence. We will be able to face ourselves, our work, our families, and the world with more wisdom and understanding, certainly with a greater sense of peace and joy. I have no intention of writing in profound terms, with its complicated sentences and hidden meanings. Rather, I have worked diligently at writing in simple, clear language. Understanding and comprehension are vital if we are serious about making a change in our life and our attitude. The grasp of happiness is just around the corner. My wish through this book is to help take you there. We are born with purpose. We live with purpose. We die with purpose. No one is born by accident. All that has ever happened before your birth prepared the world for your entry into this life. Thank you for listening, and please join us every Sunday for our watch party at our new premiere time of 2:30 Pacific Time as I premiere the next chapters of Father Jay's book.